This episode is sponsored by Linode. Linode is offering listeners of this podcast a $20 credit, which is good for 4 free months at their lowest plan. Their plans start at 1 gigabyte of RAM for $5 a month. You can get your servers in any of their 10 data centers, and their high memory plans start at 16 gigabytes. Get a server running in under a minute. They do hourly billing with a monthly cap on all plans and add-on services like backups, node balancers, Longview, etc. VMs for full control, running Docker containers, encrypted disks, VPNs, etc. You can run a private Git server. They provide native SSD storage, 200 gigabit network, and Intel E5 processors. They have 24/7 friendly support, even on holidays, and a 7-day money-back guaranteed. So go check them out at linode.com/JavaScript Jabber. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel we have Aimee Knight, Cory House.
Hello from sunny Kansas City.
AJ O'Neill.
Yo, coming at you live from dry Provo, Utah.
I'm not anywhere near Provo, Utah this time. I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. I'm actually in Atlanta for the ngATL conference. So
I was going to say, I'll see you in a couple of days. I will be there in 2 days.
Sweet. Yeah, they set me up with a room to do interviews, so I'll have to rope you into an interview.
Sounds good.
All right. So yeah,
it's like a very, very meta JavaScript Jabber if we do that.
Yeah. So just to kind of introduce the topic, since it's episode 250, on the 50s, I like to just do kind of a celebration episode. In the past, I've invited past panelists, but I got busy and I didn't do it. So it's just us. So I thought to start out, we could just talk about where we're at these days, since I know that at least in Amy's and AJ's cases, things have changed somewhat recently. And, just to let people know where you are and what kind of work you're doing these days. So Aimee, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So I'm still in Nashville, Tennessee. I contemplated moving this past summer, but I just love it here too much. I couldn't leave. I love my friends and family nearby. So this is actually my second week at a new job. I left Warner Brothers 2 weeks ago, and I am working for a company that's local to Nashville. They have business all across the United States, but local to Nashville. It's called Build Technologies. And, one thing that's really cool about here, I'll be working with, there's 4 other people that graduated from the same boot camp as I did. So I have some friends here. One of my really, really, really close friends is starting also in a couple weeks. So still doing JavaScript, of course. Very happy about that. But I'll be now doing more full stack rather than just front end. So I'm also happy. I know there's been a lot of people, talk about specializing. I specialized just doing front end when I was at Warner Brothers, but I really was ready to get back to full stack. I'm kind of excited about that.
Nice.
Awesome. All right. Good deal. All right. So yeah, well, that's cool. And I definitely, the reason I live in Utah is because my family's nearby. Of course, a lot of times that's more work than pleasure, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. So the company that I'm at, a couple people that are kind of prominent people in the Nashville tech community have recently switched to where I am as well. So I'm really excited about working with a lot of people here and just a lot of developers that I really look up to. So it's cool.
Cool. So Cory, what are you up to these days? Are you still at the same place doing the same kinds of things?
So I'm a man with too many jobs going on. I am still...
I know. I don't know how you do it. You're always on everything.
Yeah, I don't know, because I enjoy what I do, so it never really feels like work. I'm still authoring courses for Pluralsight, and launched my 9th one just a couple months ago. So I sort of feel like I'm on vacation because at the moment I'm not writing one. Usually I have one that I'm actively working on, but at the moment I have outlines that I'm working through for that next idea. Probably another one on React. But I have 2 or 3 ideas in React that I'm churning on at the moment.
What's the most? Can I ask what the most recent one you finished was?
Yeah, so that was React the Big Picture, which is kind of a strange thing for me to go back to because I've done more advanced courses. But one thing that I realized was there was a piece lacking in the library, which was anybody that's considering React having a short conversation about why React has become so popular, what the trade-offs are when you accept it, and then perhaps most importantly for people is what are the things that are potentially going to bite me? What are the pain points that I should know about now before I get in? Because every technology, regardless of how popular it is, has its pluses and minuses. So that was, strangely enough, one of the most fun pieces that I put together was the list of reasons not to use React as somebody who's obviously a pretty big fan of it. And the most odd side note on that is Dan Abramov, who is actually on the React team, was the person who gave me the most gunfire for why not to use React, because he's just one of those people who is very balanced and able to state very clearly the merits of a technology. So I love it when people who are deep in the bowels of a technology can recognize the downsides without becoming blind to fanboyism. So that's been a lot of fun. Getting courses out there, still enjoying that. And increasingly, I've been doing consulting in React in particular. So that's been one of those things that has been a eye-opener to me was my consulting practice really took off once I decided to specialize in React. Once I set up a site that was specifically for that, focused all my efforts on that area, that ecosystem, recognizing there are a lot of people that are just trying to accelerate their teams move over there. So that has me traveling around more. I just got back from Portugal. That was my first visit there. Ended up getting learning a little bit of Portuguese along the way, but I found knowing Spanish didn't get me near as far as I hoped it would. So it is a very different language for sure. And then last but not least, of course, so I am still a software architect, or actually I was retitled recently as principal engineer at Cox Automotive. So that is my day gig that I'm still thoroughly enjoying. We're all working in React, and really I'm leading a team of specialists in React here. So effectively for the enterprise, we're building reusable components. We're supporting other teams, embedding with them, and really supporting an in-house framework that is a sort of a fork of Create React app with a reusable component library and all sorts of tooling to make it easy to build front-end apps in a consistent, reliable way. So yeah, that's enough to keep me going.
Holy cow. So you eat intravenously and you sleep sometimes.
That's all I can think.
I know, right?
It's good fun. Oh, and then I also get to do JavaScript Jabber once a week. That's fun. Love this.
All right, cool. Joe just joined us. Joe, do you want to talk about what you've got going on these days?
Oh, geez, I suppose. First off, I've got a cold, so I sound a little funny. I don't know if you guys can hear it. Sometimes it seems like I sound terrible.
Not too terribly different. You sound a little bit deeper, but that's about it.
All right. So, yeah, the last while has been interesting for me. Being on the podcast has always been still a highlight of my week. Anyway, I think one of the best things to do is to go to some event and have somebody come introduce and say, man, I love listening to the podcasts. One of my favorite experiences, of course, of all time was to meet some guy who was wearing a JavaScript Jabber podcast and chat with him for a while. This is the days when Jameson was on the show. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, are you a fan of the podcast? He says, oh, yeah, I love those guys. They're great. And I said, especially really like Jameson. I said, yeah, Jameson's a great guy. He's like, oh, do you know Jameson? And I was like, oh, yeah, I know Jameson a little bit. It took him a while before he finally said, hey, wait, here, Joe, you're on the show too.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny. But so me personally, I'm doing still a lot of Pluralsite work, and I'm putting together more and more conferences. So it's a little bit early here. I've got a couple of potentially really huge announcements to to make here, but it's actually just a tiny bit early for both of them, so I won't spill the beans. But I've got a couple of really big conferences in the works right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you starting any new podcasts coming up soon?
I am starting one new podcast. It's actually in conjunction with some other projects that I'm doing, but Chuck and I and a few other people are going to be doing a podcast on Vue. Do we have a name for it yet, Chuck?
Yeah, Views on Vue is what I've decided to call it.
I really like it. You're pretty clever with your podcast names. So I'm excited to start that. What are we starting? Like a week, 2 weeks is our first episode?
It's a week from, or 2 weeks from Friday, I think, because I'm traveling this week and next week. So
yeah, well, so we'll be recording roughly when this comes out, right?
Yeah. So yeah, when this comes out, we'll probably have a couple episodes live.
Yeah. So that's a really cool thing, is to get to start up a new podcast on Vue. I'm just a big fan of technology in general. So, Chuck, are you starting up another podcast as well beyond this one?
Yeah, I was going to talk about that in a minute, but I'm also starting up a React podcast. So
yeah, so I really we talked about being on that one, but I just can't do 4 podcasts. That's already bad enough doing 2 and then adding on a third one. So yeah, but I'm really excited to start the Vue podcast and be involved in that. I've been enjoying playing around with Vue and learning Vue and seeing what it is. It's almost sad that there hasn't been enough new shiny toys lately, that which is weird, right? Like, we're hitting some weird stabilization. I know it's not going to last long. Pretty soon we're all going to be doing Elm, compiling to WebAssembly, but we won't be writing it in Elm. We'll be writing it in Iron Python or something.
Oh, there you go. Iron Python. I love it.
But yeah, so that's what I've been doing. We're right in the thick of planning ngConf right now. This will be year 5 and hopefully our best year ever. And so that takes up a lot of my time, and I'm just put up the wrapping touches on 6 or 7 hours worth of courses on migrating from AngularJS to Angular. Put out a big picture course on Angular recently. I'm going to put out a course on testing Angular pretty quick. I've got an update to my Webpack course that's going to come out. And then who knows, I've got a lot of irons in the fire on future things to do. But that's pretty much it for me.
Nice. And your courses are all going to be on Pluralsight as well?
Yeah, all these ones are on Pluralsight still.
Awesome. Good to know.
Yep. Trying to keep up with Cory, who's been really killing it lately, putting out awesome courses.
Yeah. Cory practically works for Pluralsight now, right?
Yeah. His big picture React course is actually really excellent. So whether you do or you don't do React, it's absolutely a great way to spend an hour of your day. It's about 50 minutes or 65 minutes, Cory?
That's right. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, I went through and watched that one. Always good to be stay educated on everything that's going on. I've done some React, but it was great to see sort of that high level view again. And I put out a big picture course on Angular. I think these sorts of courses are valuable, right? Even if you're doing them, to kind of step back and see the viewpoint of somebody who's really an expert and has their finger on the pulse of what's going on. So yeah, if you get time, go check out Cory's big picture React course.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love the idea of the big picture courses, because then I can go and I can look at big picture Angular, big picture React, big picture Vue, and then decide if I need a front-end framework, which one kind of looks the best to me. So,
right.
And yeah. So AJ, what are you working on these days?
So I did a little bit of side work that was kind of interesting recently. And so there's a fork of Bitcoin called Dash, and there's actually a company that sponsors it. So it's got this kind of dual organizational structure, that there's a company, but there's also community. And the benefit that gives is that when protocol changes need to happen in order to benefit people, like, for example, transaction fees to go lower, increasing the block size so that more messages can go in at a time, things like that, they go through pretty smoothly without a lot of bike shedding and resistance. So it seems like I'm not necessarily an advocate of blockchain currencies. I'm not going to preach to you. Certainly, I would not say that you should invest in them, because if it's a currency, that would not be something that you invest in, other than, like Iraqi dinars back when there was that whole investment thing with that. It generally doesn't turn out well. But as a currency, as something to exchange value back and forth, to me, Dash seems like it's going to be one of the more stable and usable cryptocurrencies as the bubble kind of evens out and it becomes clear like which cryptocurrency is useful for what type of thing. And so I learned a lot about the blockchain itself, because I had to read up on the web APIs, the binary RPCs, that whole gambit of stuff from here to there. And so that was actually really fun and really interesting. And I'm going to continue probably doing some more work in the Dash community. Also, another thing that I'm really interested in getting to the product stage is a domain service that will allow you to be able to use devices in your home, whether it be your computer or Raspberry Pi or something like that, a dynamic domain service that not just handles that the DNS is dynamically updated, but also handles that devices get assigned names so that you could access specific devices that you own, and potentially retrieve content off of them, as well as handling so there'd be a little bit of software that comes with this, and handling the NAT PNP, UPnP of the router, or tunneling, so that right now it's small niche focus would be just more on hobbyist students, high school students, college students, boot camp students, people that the thing. I think I had this in a talk I gave, or a podcast I mentioned before, but what I want to get to for people, what I want to help them accomplish, is that point where you're starting out, you've got your hello world, you're ready for interactivity, and you want to be able to call up mom and say, hey, mom, check out this cool thing I did. And mom can click a button and something happens, and you can click a button and something happens again. And I don't see that being solved on localhost, because obviously your mom can't get to your local host. But I think that once this connectivity or barrier is broken down to where a device that you can hold in your hands can be accessed in some capacity by someone that you care about somewhere else, I think it's going to open a door for a new wave of decentralized innovation. And I think that it's going to be a very efficient and very powerful decentralized innovation. So that's my gut speaking, and that's one thing that I'm really focused on.
Super cool.
Also, I got married. I think I mentioned that in one of my since the last time we did status updates, but and that has been a good experience, and I'm kind of one of those introspective people, and so just a change of state of life, of perspective, just very interesting new experience for me.
Awesome. All right. Well, I should chime in here with a few things. So I'm at NG Atlanta, and that's one of the things that I've been doing a bit more of lately, is just going to the conferences. The idea kind of sprung out of going to some of the Microsoft events and doing some of those recordings. You've gotten some of those on this show, if you've been listening for a while. In fact, I actually met one of the Microsoft folks that had been on one of the episodes here at the NG Girls event, where they're teaching people Angular. But anyway, so I actually was sponsored to come out here and do video interviews with folks. And so, I hooked up some video equipment, and I'll be, talking to that. It'll all show up on the YouTube channel, devchat.tv/YouTube. And so I'm starting to head a little bit more into the video realm. And then I've gotten just a ton of requests for various podcast topics. One of the ones that I got requested the most was React. And so I'm pulling together a show called React Roundup. And we're pulling some folks in. So if you listen to React Native Radio with Nader Dabit, he's going to be on there. Kent C. Dodds is going to be on there. Tara Miniksik, I think that's how you say her name, from Progress, is also going to be on there. And so we're pulling that together, and that should be fun. And then, as Joe mentioned, we're pulling together a Vue podcast, and we've got some folks lined up for that as well. Eric Hanchett, I think is his name. He's the author of Vue.js in action. So he's going to be on there. And then we've got Cher. I don't remember her name, but anyway, it should be really fun to just pull all this together and just kind of see where things are going to wind up with a lot of these frameworks. But even if they don't go that far, because Vue is growing, but I'm really bad at predicting, where things are going to end up. Is there going to be a new React that kind of takes over the framework arena or not? I don't know. So, but it's fun to just build these communities within the communities and have those conversations. So we're starting new shows. I'm also playing with the idea of starting shows up on like artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, augmented reality and virtual reality, game development, Python. Those have all also come up. And I'm also in the process, probably sooner than any of those, of pulling together a show on Elixir. And that comes out of mostly my support for the Ruby community on Ruby Rogues. So those are kind of the things that I'm working on. I'm also pulling together a speaker roster for React Developer Summit, which is an online event. It's free to attend live. So if you see a talk you want to go to and you don't have money, that's fine. Just show up. But if you want the videos and some of the bonuses that I'm working on pulling together, then you buy a ticket. But anyway, that should all be fun. And those are all kinds of the things that I'm working on. And then just getting the processes for putting podcasts together nailed down so that I can essentially just point somebody at those directions and have them off and running without having to do too much work or training, and making sure that you all get a consistent experience with the podcast. So, kind of interesting focus on thing that's a little bit different from, I guess, people who are out there writing code day in and day out for cash, or making courses. I have been working on some courses. I'm trying to get the final version of my How to Find a Job course out, but that's not really my main focus in a lot of ways. So anyway, it's kind of interesting. I'm curious what you all have coming up this year. Like what are you focused on? What are you learning about? Aimee recommended this in the chat channel, and I think it's a terrific question. So what are we looking forward to this year? Aimee, since you recommended this question, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a couple different things. So beginning of this year, I still have a couple more conferences where I'm giving this talk I've been giving this about CSS and deep diving into that. So that's what I'll be doing at NG Atlanta, and a couple others. I will be speaking at FluentConf, which I'm super excited about because that has been one of my goals for a long time, to speak there. So I have that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm thrilled. So I'll be, tweaking my talk more and more for that. Just as stuff's always evolving. So I'm always updating my talk with like more content and stuff. So that's at the beginning of the year. And then I want to, some people might think this is a little crazy, but I have spent so much time focused on the front end that I think for the better half of the year and the end of the year, I really want to like deep dive into the back end, but at a lot lower than just like Node and JavaScript. So I'm going to start learning Rust. So this has like nothing to do with this has absolutely nothing to do with work whatsoever. It's just for a long time, I've played around a little bit with like Haskell and Elm, but I wanted to, do a language that really makes me think about how I write JavaScript differently, because it's just like something completely different. So like I ran this like Twitter poll or something and asked people if they thought I should learn Go or Rust or Haskell. Or I think it was Scala, because I was interested in Scala. But I think Go is probably the most practical of those three. But I also think it's probably not that Go is not challenging, but it's also, more similar to JavaScript than Rust or something like that. So that's kind of like another thing that I'm going to be looking at. And I know, so AJ doesn't believe in quote unquote investing in cryptocurrency. But for me, I don't do it, to make money necessarily. I don't do it at all for that. I just do it because I'm interested in it. But, making a little bit of money on the side doesn't hurt with it. So I'm always, as it has been a couple of my picks lately, like different coins and stuff that I've been buying and stuff like that. So I will continue on with that. And then anybody who follows me on Twitter, like outside of programming, so I know like AJ mentioned getting married. That's not the case for me, but outside of programming, I've been like super focused. I've always been into running and lifting, but I've been lifting heavier and heavier and heavier. So I've been tweeting about that here and there as I'm like in the gym going really heavy. So that's kind of what I've been focused on this year and what I'll be focusing on the rest of the year.
I'll try not to offend you while you're here so you don't beat me up. Very cool. What do you see coming for you, Cory?
Well, so I've been thinking about broadening my horizons on technical side a bit. The single technology that I'm most excited about this year is GraphQL. I've held it at arm's length deliberately because early on I looked at it and I was very excited about it, but I saw a core problem with it, which was I felt like for it to create adoption required front-end developers to get excited about it, but then they needed to have the power to actually get it implemented on the back end. And despite that still being an ongoing concern for me, I think I'm seeing increasingly interest in back-end developer and service developers having interest in putting it to use. And then I've also just found out very recently that you can rather easily take an existing RESTful API, wrap it in GraphQL, and suddenly get all the goodness that comes with it. So all of a sudden now you can jump into Graphical, you can run queries on that data. So it makes it very, very discoverable. Now, all of a sudden, behind the scenes, GraphQL can be managing the fact that it might take multiple HTTP requests to return the data structure that you need. But that whole story, yes, it can be done with RESTful APIs, but GraphQL just makes it so easy and gives you such a clear path. So I'm really bullish on it for this year. What I also see is I originally looked at GraphQL as something that was specific to React, and I've since realized that that's not at all the case, that GraphQL is really just a specification. And so because of that, you can use GraphQL with Angular, with Vue, with Ember. There are bindings out there for different libraries to pull all this together. And I shouldn't say bindings, libraries that allow you to interact there, because effectively you're making a call to an endpoint and sending it some data, so that there's really nothing inherently tied to React there. So that's probably the single technology that I'm planning to dive deep on. Also, my other probably secondaries are AWS is big for me. We've adopted it heavily at my full-time job here at Cox Automotive, and I'm really enjoying working with it. Obviously, a very powerful platform. And then Docker as well. I'm excited about the opportunities to use Docker as a front-end developer, because one pain point that I keep seeing right now is lots of us are out here creating boilerplates or more comprehensive starter kits, things like Create React App or Ember CLI. And those are really cool, but they do rely on Node on your machine. And they do, in that case, end up having some potentially quirky behaviors depending on your OS and the version of Node that you're running and the permissions that you have on your machine, and so on. So I see an opportunity to use Docker to create more consistency across teams, so that I stop having this conversation around what version of Node are you on, what OS are you on, because we have spent a fair amount of time of squashing issues that are specific to platforms. So I really like all the power that you get from something like Docker. So I think with those three, that'll be a pretty busy year for me. And then the other thing I'm doing is just always trying new things in conference talks. I have a sort of a careers talk that's been churning in my head that I'm started submitting, that I'm calling at the moment Going Pro. I'm just thinking about how you draw a line between what makes a professional software developer. Because that's a heck of a gray line, and everybody wants to think of themselves as a professional, and really it's a spectrum of how seriously somebody chooses to take your career. So it's really a conversation about, if you want to turn it up to 10, what does that look like, both good and bad? So I'm having a lot of fun writing that talk right now.
This episode is sponsored by Kendo UI. Kendo UI allows you to build better apps faster. They have a comprehensive library ranging from data grids and charts to buttons and sliders. Plus, you can use their components as plain JavaScript as well as in Angular, React, and Vue. They have a large collection of customizable popular themes like Bootstrap and Material. Go check them out at javascriptjabber.com/KendoUI.
Nice. That's awesome. And I really love the ideas around Docker. When I talked to Derek Bailey, his ideas around Docker were mostly centered around the team using it to get a consistent environment. And people would ask him about using it on the server for deployments and stuff, and he'd be like, I don't even care about that. And so
Yeah.
it's really funny just to hear you say it. And also you're talking about all these starter kits. And I just love the idea of being able to say, look, run this script. It'll set up Docker on your computer, be it Windows or Mac. And then you just run this container, and then you've got the exact same environment that I have.
Exactly. Yeah, it just takes another set of potential variables out of the way. I love how quickly it can stand something up that's reliable.
Awesome. AJ, what do you see coming down the pipe for you this year?
Well, I spoke to some of that already. One of the other things I didn't mention is that I've been trying to learn a lot more about business. In the past, I kind of thought, oh, this legal stuff and paperwork and blah, blah, blah. I just wish somebody else would do all that for me. And over time, I've come to realize there's a lot of value in knowing how to do those things yourself. And there's a lot of power from people that I've talked to in being a CEO, CTO combo of someone who's willing to take both technical ends and business ends and push business with both of those perspectives. And so I've been listening to more audiobooks about that. I'm getting enrolled in a local business boot camp called Startup Ignition, which is there's a guy. I'm pretty sure he's a millionaire. He's one of those very helpful people in the community. He used to be a professor at BYU, and he just does a lot to help people get started with their business. And then he's happy to meet with people for lunch and give feedback and that sort of thing. He's just a great guy. And so he does some of these classes, and they're for pay, of course, because he wants to attract the type of people that are serious about, learning what he has to offer and whatnot. And so I've enrolled in that, got a list of books to read and started on some of them. So I really think that this year I'm going to become much more of a business person than I thought that I wanted to be. And I feel really motivated to do that. And I don't know. I mean, the future is, what does Yoda say? Something like, the future is very fluid, always moving. You can never know for sure what's up ahead. Just good guesses. So, I'm trying out different things, and it's nice to be in an exploratory phase and have some of that zest of life of learning new things and getting into new groups of people and whatnot, for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. What's the course called if people are interested and they're somewhere in the Utah area?
Oh, Startup Ignition. There's one in Salt Lake. There's one in Provo, and they they kind of run for a couple months and then have a break and then run for a couple months. So it's kind of like a code boot camp. It's like 11 or 12 weeks or something like that. And there's time that's in class with everybody. Then there's one-on-one mentoring, and it's an evening class for most of the sessions, I think. And then at the end, there's another class or two where everybody gets back together and shows like the progress that they've made and how they've applied principles and how things are working for their business that they're starting or growing or whatever.
Nice. I'll just step in here. I mean, similar to what I've already talked a bit to this. Mostly at this point, what I see coming this year is just getting some of these newer shows started. And then I hired a new business coach at the beginning of the year, and their focus is on helping you systemize a lot of your business. Basically, one of the quote unquote products of my business is essentially the handbook on how to do what we do. And so I think probably at least the next 6 months, I'm going to be doing that. And then I'll be able to expand what I'm doing to other areas. But that's a big push for me. And then the only other thing that I have that I haven't mentioned yet is that I've been actually building software to help me manage the podcasts. And I'm hoping to have that together and launched by this summer to help manage a lot of that movement and things like that. So
it's going to be like Uber for podcasts.
I don't know about that, but it'll, I mean, it's all the scheduling and management and show notes and RSS feed management and sponsorship management and all of that stuff that you kind of have going on that is fairly routine. I mean, the only parts of it that are not routine or not things that I can just automate away are basically talking to sponsors and getting, doing sales calls and a few things like that. I mean, most of the rest of it is, it's pretty routine, putting in banners. I have to record the spots for the shows, but other than that, it, like I said, it's pretty routine. So just setting all that up so that it's easily tracked and easily managed just makes things pretty, anyway, I feel like a lot of other podcasters would benefit from that. So I'm launching a SaaS and systemizing the podcasts and all of that stuff at the same time, and it keeps me plenty busy.
I expect it to be $1 billion business, Chuck.
Yeah. Am I doing it in Ruby? It's Ruby on the back end. So I've been building it in Rails because it's what I'm used to. It's pretty.
It's what you can get done fast.
Yep, exactly. And that's more important to me on something like this than some of these other ones. I'd like to start a video series where I explore different back-end languages and frameworks, and the same with front-end languages and frameworks. But I'm not there. It's something that I may start like second or third quarter this year. But where I'm at right now is mostly just focused around those things, the conferences, the podcasts, and then getting this piece of software together. And even if I'm the only person that ever uses it, if it takes enough of my management issues off my plate, then it's still worth it. So I have to say that the front end it's all server rendered with Ruby, and then I've used jQuery where I've needed to. I find that I'm trying to figure out if I want to try and sprinkle Angular through it and just, manage the areas that really kind of need the front end managed with something like Angular or React, or if I want to just forget it and just use jQuery, because I don't have a ton of stuff that really needs to be heavily managed, animated or anything like that. And most of the data is pretty static, and I don't think it's going to be an app that people live in all day, every day. So anyway, it just, for me, I don't know if it meets all the use cases for using a large front-end framework on. But anyway, we can have that argument on another show.
I didn't think there was any argument. I think we all agree it's a good tool for the job.
I think we should argue over it.
Or just vanilla JavaScript. We could argue that.
We should absolutely argue
over it.
Do you
really need jQuery? I think that was like a thing 3 years ago.
I was so ready to start the fight now.
Yeah.
I disagree, Joe. The ones without arguments are best.
So it's Joe's turn. So Joe, what do you have coming up this year?
Oh, well, I've got one big, huge conference that's coming up. Again, I'm not quite ready to announce it yet, but it'll be very soon. I think we're actually going to have a special episode about it. I'm hoping that I'm going to have two big, huge conferences coming up this year. but the other one is really speculative at the moment, so can't even talk about it. But those are big things that are coming up this year for me. Another big change that may come up this year is I may be changing a little bit on how I've been doing education for so dang long, and I love doing it, and I don't want to get out of it. But I may just be changing the venue on how I do education work.
Mm-hmm.
Pluralsite has been really an awesome place for me to work and produce courses, and I'm hoping that I can expand what I've been doing for Pluralsight, whether that's with Pluralsight or some other venues. I'm hoping to just do more educational work and more conferences as well. And with a Vue podcast, so I'm hoping to get more into doing some Vue education in addition to the Angular education that I've already been doing, and just moving on in the same manner. This last year has been pretty big for me personally. My parents have both required a lot of caretaking, so I've been doing a lot more of stuff like that, and I haven't been able to focus as much on my career in the last year for that reason. And so I'm hoping that this next year will be where I can do a lot more with my career than I have been able to do in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
Hugs. I know how that goes.
Yeah, me too.
And so that's
good deal. Yeah, it's interesting how things change. You branch out into new areas, and you have these opportunities. It's exciting to see where you're going to wind up with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. Things have happened recently that have been really bad for my career overall. And then I was kind of down because it was also happening at the same time that I was having a lot of personal issues, mostly with caretaking for my parents, but some other stuff as well. And so I was really frustrated with my career and where it was at the moment. And then I remembered to look back every time I had something really terrible happen career-wise. It always turned out to lead to something, far more amazing, like being on this podcast, which is the first podcast I started doing with Chuck, was this podcast. But being on this was a result of a really bad job. And I was so frustrated with it that I just decided to go off and look at doing other things about my career. And that's how I started going to the JavaScript meetups at Utah.js. That's how I met Chuck and got onto this podcast. So it ended up being a huge thing for me with that job. At the same time, that same job led me to working for Pluralsight and authoring, which let me go full time and leave doing a regular job, which I still loved doing my regular job, but it allowed me to work full time on education, which I just love. Just love doing education, so it's been great for me. So every time something bad has happened, it's always led to something better. So I just try to keep that in mind that, this next year I think was going to be a great year, just because of the fact that the last year's been pretty rough.
I think I needed to hear that. All right. Well, I know that some of you have some hard time stops coming up, so let's go ahead and move over to picks.
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says "Pay me now." And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
Corey, do you want to start us off with picks?
Okay. I'm going to go with a pick that is a tweet that I tweeted out yesterday that blew up bigger than I would have guessed. So almost 1,300 likes in a little over 24 hours. And it's all about a JavaScript tip about how you can easily simulate named function parameters. And this had never occurred to me, but we all understand, if you understand modern JavaScript, you already understand how to do this. It's really a two-step process. You have your function accept an object instead of plain arguments, and then use destructuring. And by doing that, people can declare which pieces of the object they want to work with. You can declare, of course, default values for any pieces of that object. And you don't have to worry about things like Boolean variables not being very readable or magic numbers not being clear. You've probably had this before where you put arguments in the wrong order. That sort of thing goes away. So pretty cool little JavaScript tip that I stumbled across. So I'll share that in the notes. That's my pick.
Awesome. Joe, what are your picks?
All right, so I got one pick. I've been putting together a website for a new conference that I'm putting together. And we're running on a tight budget, so we didn't want to hire a designer. I've had some bad experiences sometimes with spending $20,000 on some little dinky website, custom built and just mostly static websites. And so we wanted to live on our tight budget. And I was looking for some tools, and Merritt Christensen happens to work at a company called Webflow that produces a product called Webflow that is kind of, in essence, a competitor to WordPress. It's sort of, in some small sense, in the sense that, or maybe more like, Wix? I think that's one of the ones where you can, kind of anybody can sort of do it and create their own website, right? And so I decided to check it out. And it's actually super cool because not only does it include the ability to build the website, kind of visually drag and put together your website, and you can buy templates, which is great for somebody like me who's really terrible with design, right? But also it has a built-in CMS, they call it. So basically you can go in there and you can add data elements and define them. And then you can put in this little section that says, hey, in this section, this comes from this collection. It's basically kind of a non-relational collection, sort of document database, but kind of built into the whole thing. And you could say this element comes from that, and then it just repeats it, and you can tell it what fields come from where. So it's kind of funny. It's almost it's a pretty reasonable step between just drag and drop building a website and a tiny bit of data driven website as well. And finding templates for it was great. I've just been having a really good time, and they got good documentation. I mean, I don't know if really having a really good time is exactly it. It's not my favorite activity in the world, but it's been pretty well. So I think it's a really cool place to go if you're not a design oriented person and you don't want to spend 100 hours putting together a custom website. This is pretty cool. So that's my pick is Webflow.
Awesome. AJ, what are your picks?
So I don't know if I picked this last week or not, but there's a YouTube series called How to Start a Startup. And it's 20 videos that are about 45 minutes, I think is the average time each. They are from the people of Y Combinator, including founders, people that went through and were very successful. And they talk about different topics. And one that I was kind of tipping a hat to earlier when I was jokingly saying it's going to be the Uber of podcasts was that scratching your own itch is the way that most of these wonderful companies were started, is somebody had a problem and they were, just going after it. So I've really been enjoying watching and listening to that. And then I've got another one. There is an Indian film. It's in Hindi, well, Hinglish, whatever you want to call it, because it does have a bunch of English phrases thrown in there, but it's got English subtitles, and it's called Singham, Singham. And it is pretty much, you've probably seen the clip on YouTube with this guy reaching up in a car that's tumbling overhead and like pulls the bad guy out and slams him on the ground. It's just an awesome Bollywood film. And I think that anyone who can laugh at the ridiculousness of an extreme action movie would love it. So, go grab it on Amazon and just enjoy the whole thing. Eastern movies are great. I've come to be a little bit more familiar with them as I've been on flights to like China and India and whatnot. And I love Eastern film. Like it's generally, from what I've seen, a lot cleaner than American film. And just even though they, still have bad guys that kill people and whatnot, it feels a little more lighthearted, a little more fun. And then there's like dancing and singing. Like basically these action movies are also musicals. So I don't know. I like it and I'd recommend it.
Awesome. Aimee, what are your picks?
Yep. So the first one, non-code related, really. It is called Improving Yourself to Death. So this was in the New Yorker, and we've talked like a little bit here and there. I think some of my picks have been towards like mindfulness and stuff like that. So I feel like these kind of articles maybe are better geared towards certain people. Like I know for me, I am extremely type A, very driven. So having articles like this are good reminders for myself that sometimes it's good to like take a walk and rest and just be mindful for a while. So that was pretty good. And then the other one, this one is really good actually. And it's called, What Does Code Readability Mean? And so that's like a very catchy title, but I think a lot of the points that this makes are worth contemplating. And basically like the premise is just that, most of the time when we say this code isn't readable, it's kind of coming from like our own like insufficiencies and stuff like that. Yes, the code a lot of times can be more readable, but a lot of times, it's just like our inexperience or something with it. So it talks about that a little bit, but then it just also talks about how to get better at writing more readable code. So I would say this is like good for anybody at any level. It was a really good article. So I'll put links to both those in the show notes. That's it for me.
Awesome. I'm going to chime in here with a few picks. One of them is, if you are listening to this, you're probably thinking, Chuck sounds a little bit different. I mentioned I'm at a conference, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I'm recording on the conference. First of all, I'm using an ATR 2100 microphone. Costs about $60 on Amazon. And it does, I think I have the cardioid pickup pattern turned off. So I think it's just picking up the whole room, which means that you're probably getting a little bit more echo. I could switch it, but at this point, you would just pick up the difference in sound. So I'll just leave it. But it does USB and it also does XLR. So if you're hooking into a mixer or anything like that, then you can do both. And since I'm here, I brought with me my Zoom H6, which I've already done some recording with today. And it has XLR, so I could just hook it into there and it'd power my mic. So it's pretty great. I'm pretty happy with it. And then I've just got it hooked up, and I have my AirPods in my ears, so that the microphone isn't picking up everybody else talking. And that's pretty much all I'm doing, is I'm just recording this into my laptop using Ecamm Call Recorder. So so that really, really helps, and I'm pretty happy with it. And then, I'm going to be doing some videos here at NG Atlanta, so I'm going to pick that. If you're interested in seeing conversations that I have with the speakers and other folks who are here, definitely check that out. Progress, who does Kendo UI, actually paid for that this trip, so kudos to them. They're actually, I guess full disclaimer, they're sponsoring this show, and they're also sponsoring the React show when it comes out. So, I do have a sponsorship relationship with them, but Kendo UI looks like a great toolkit anyway, so definitely check it out. And then the last thing that I'm going to pick, and this is something that I just barely discovered and experienced myself. So I went over to the conference today because they were doing some workshops, and the big workshop was NG Girls. And so if you're familiar with like Railsbridge or some of the other coding, hey, come in and we'll teach you how to write some code in whatever language. Railsbridge does that for Rails. NG Girls does that for Angular. And, it's the same kind of thing. They give you a project to work on. They give you a little bit of a primer, and then they just help you get everything set up. So if you're looking for a place where you can go and pick up some code, if you're new to JavaScript or, overall coding, it's a terrific program, and they just walk you through getting started. And so one of the things that Cory spoke to earlier with, the setup, a lot of the folks that I was talking to there, that was one of the things that they ran into just getting in and getting started, and got a little discouraged on it. If I can't even set this up, how do I actually start to learn to code? And, just having those conversations with people and getting to know them, and then also helping them realize that, setup's a pain for the experienced people too. And that's not really the core skill that we're looking for them to learn, also helps them. So anyway, I just really love these learning groups that come out of a lot of this, these other movements within coding, because I think it's important for us to reach out and help other people learn to code. So anyway, so I'm going to pick NG Girls if you're interested in learning Angular. And those are the picks. And so congratulations, everybody, on being part of this show for 250 episodes. It's been 5 years. Anyway.
Long time.
Yeah. So anyway, it's been super fun to pull this together. I'm glad you all enjoy it. And I really enjoy meeting you all at conferences. So if you are at a conference that any of us are at, feel free to reach out, say hi. Because, like Joe mentioned, I love hearing from people. So anyway, we'll just go ahead and wrap this one up, and we will catch everyone next week.
Bye, guys.
Later.
And girls.
See ya.
For listening.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.